Chapter 5. It's always what is Collateral doing, never how is Collateral doing. I explained everything. Halfway through, Kyle's anger at me faded into horrified disbelief. By the time I got around to showing him the video, the anger had switched targets. He wouldn't be calling any cops on me anytime soon. I spun the narrative a little bit, making myself look a bit more weak and helpless than I actually was. I also made my opposition seem more overwhelming. I also let him keep thinking my name was Adrian. Taking advantage of Kyle's good nature in such a way didn't sit right with me, but I didn't want him herring off half-cocked and getting himself pointlessly arrested. By the time I was done, I had a staunch defender. He handed my phone back. "I'm so sorry. What can I do to help?" he asked. "Let me sleep," I said instantly. "I'm exhausted. Once we're away from the station, I'll feel better, but I need to rest." "Deal." He nodded sharply. "Want me to bring you something to eat later?" "Marry me." He laughed and left to go do his job. I put my bracelet back on and curled up on the chair bed. I slept for 3 hours, ate the sandwich and chips Kyle brought me, went to the bathroom, and went back to sleep for another 12 hours. Kyle woke me up at that point, claiming to be worried about me falling into a coma. I laughed him off, but ate the breakfast sandwich he gave me and borrowed his phone to research the Mexican super and criminal scenes. I gave it back before he left, then got changed into clothes that didn't smell like mixed alcohols and day-old sweat. My new outfit was identical to my old outfit, except for the colors. The pastel green blouse was now stained beyond salvaging, more's the pity. Ah well, I knew where to buy a replacement. The rest of the trip passed uneventfully. I'd tossed a book I'd been planning to read in my duffel before starting this madcap journey, and I alternated between reading, trancing, and watching the scenery. Kyle poked his head in every few hours to make sure I was all right. I made sure to make my bracelet jingle every time the door opened, just to be safe. During the few minutes at a time of research I could manage with Kyle's phone, I pieced together what I could expect in Mexico. The Mexican super situation was pretty different from back home. While they did have a few supers like me running around, that is, those without a clear mythological origin to their strangeness, the most prominent supers were avatars of regional deities and folk heroes. I wasn't exactly sure how it worked, since the process was kept hush-hush. The general information I could find indicated it was something along the lines of the deities loaning their powers to the best-suited human. Or maybe it was possession or a split personality. Whatever the case, mortals took on the mantle and name of the empowering deity in exchange for protecting the area. The system worked out well, as far as anyone said online. By the time the train pulled into the San Francisco airport station, I'd shaken off the final effects of Tuesday's madness and was ready to face Collateral. Kyle fretted and offered to come with me, but I gave him a generous tip and told him that the best thing he could do was to act as though everything was normal. He hesitated, but agreed. My prediction that the cops back home would want to keep my situation local proved correct. I breezed through security and made it to my terminal with time to spare. Once there, I bought an overpriced hot dog and settled in to wait. Getting on the plane was easy, though the coach seat Gigavolt had purchased for me was cramped enough that bumping knees was inevitable, and the woman next to me was muttering over both a rosary and Buddhist prayer beads simultaneously. Her anxiety was contagious, but that didn't stop me from passing out as soon as I'd buckled my seatbelt. My seatmate nudged me awake at the end of the flight. My mouth tasted like something noxious had died in it, I had a huge crick in my neck, and every muscle in my body was protesting my sleeping position. God, I felt old. Disembarking went as smoothly as embarking, and a wave of air conditioning greeted me as I stepped into the Tijuana airport. The place looked like most of the other small airports I'd ever been in, though all of the signs and advertisements were written in Spanish. The language class I'd taken back in high school got me out of the building, but I had no idea how to get to my hotel. I stood there, frozen with nerves, for the first time since setting out. Salvation came in the form of a hummingbird. It had been flying around the flowers outside the airport until it noticed me. As soon as it did, it shot over and hovered in front of my face. The surprise snapped me out of my paralysis. This, at least, I was prepared for. I nodded to the hummingbird and stepped into an alcove. Once I was sure nobody was watching us, I bowed shallowly and said, "Hello, envoy of Huitzilopochtli." No, I hadn't lost my mind. I was technically nowhere near the Aztec Avatar's territory. They held sway over Mexico City and the surrounding areas while Tijuana was up by the California border, but they had some authority over the whole country because of their history and proximity to the capital. The only exception was the Yucatan Peninsula, which was my territory. The two groups taken together were a bit like the FSB in the US. Huitzilopochtli, as war god avatar and head of the Aztec pantheon, held a government position equivalent to general. He was likely the person encouraging General to take collateral back. The bird dipped and rose in a nod of acknowledgement. It and its kin couldn't talk per se, but they were clever when the avatars had a mission for them. Time to play 20 questions and figure out exactly what this one's mission was. Are you here to take me to collateral? Another nod. Is he nearby? Nod. Do you know what I can do? Nod. Can I stop somewhere to drop off my bag before we go? Nod. All right then, I'll follow you. The bird whirled around my head twice before shooting off down the road. I followed at a trot, duffel held in front of me. The bird led me right to my hotel. I assumed Quetzalcoatl must have had something to do with it knowing where to go. That begged a question. How much trouble was Collateral causing if two of the biggest Mexican supers were collaborating on his removal? It boded poorly, to say the least. The bird perched on my head while I checked in and rode on me all the way to my room. As soon as I tossed my duffel on the bed, the bird whirled around me in a flurry of movement. No time for a shower? I asked, only half expecting an answer. Nod. Okay then. What did Collateral do to make you so eager to be rid of him? A looping figure that I assumed translated to too complicated to explain. I shrugged agreeably and asked if the bird would mind if I activated my power. Shake and a deliberate turn of its back. I went unnoticed as I followed my new avian friend out of the building. We walked for a long time, and I almost lost my guide more than once. The bird led me through a bustling urban area, full of colorful fabrics and vendors hawking goods. I had to tuck my elbows in against the throng of people passing on all sides. The place was vivid and lively, and I kind of hated it. No offense to anyone who called it home or worked there, but the river of humanity that surrounded me was overwhelming in all the wrong ways. We passed through that area into a residential zone full of high-rises, small restaurants, and traffic. I was half convinced the bird was taking me on a sightseeing tour, but the buildings slowly became smaller, dirtier, and more decrepit. The people became less well-kempt, and soon mean sparks started showing in some of their eyes. I was more and more grateful for my unremarkability the further out we went. We were passing by a building with half a dozen condemned signs in the yard when a car came screaming around a corner. I would have kept walking, but the driver lost control. The car spun out and the rear end crashed into a fire hydrant on the opposite side of the street. That would have been bad enough, but the car had hit the hydrant in such a way as to break it. Water erupted in an artificial geyser and sent the metal hydrant flying. It soared like a bottle rocket under the pressure of the water it had once contained. I watched with an open mouth as it went up in a low, fast arc and slammed into the upper chest of a man who'd been half a block away. He flew back as though he'd been hit by a wrecking ball and landed with the husk of the hydrant pinning him. I ran over to see if I could help, phone out and checking the emergency services number for Mexico. It was 911, same as the US, and I dialed it as I crossed the street. My little guide hid in my hair again. The car's driver, a leggy young man with the beginnings of a beard and an unfortunate haircut, had climbed out of his totaled vehicle and come over as well. I stood between him and the body and handed the phone to him. I needed someone fluent to handle the call, and I didn't think he'd handle the body's condition well. Not after he'd already had to contend with the shock of his crash. Better to put off the trauma. No hablo español, lo siento, I told him. He nodded, took my phone, and started talking to the operator. I knelt down as close to our unfortunate friend as I could without getting bits on my shoes, but there really wasn't anything I could do. His lungs and neck had been pulverized by a few 100 pounds of solid metal. If he hadn't died instantly, which I doubted, his heart had been reduced to paste. With no way to get blood to his brain, he was unrecoverable. Injury incompatible with life, and what a way to go. The driver got a clear look at the remains for the first time and blanched. I held out my hand for the phone, and he passed it off to me before staggering away to vomit. I'd get the paramedics to take care of him. His being up and moving was a good sign, but that had still been a nasty crash. He straightened up once he had emptied his stomach and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Madre de Dio, he said, which, yeah, that summed it up pretty well. I sat him down on the curb and imitated breathing exercises. We stayed like that until an ambulance and a police car rolled up. I slipped away and disappeared before anyone managed to dismount. I made it a block away before the shock hit. My legs gave out from under me, and I had to lean against a wall. My bird fluttered around me, brushing me with its wings. That didn't help much. I was too overwhelmed by the ringing in my ears and the churning in my stomach. That had been a lot. It had been a lot, and I had a good guess who was responsible. Not the driver, poor sap, or not entirely. No, that situation was a 1 in a trillion freak accident. I mean, the chances of a car crashing into a hydrant, not impossible, but not common. The chances of the hydrant breaking, those things were sturdy. The chances of it breaking in precisely the correct way to set it on a trajectory that resulted in a fatality, it had Collateral's fingerprints all over it. And sure, while shit happens sometimes is a fact of life, it comes with a corollary that unlikely shit happens with unusual frequency around Collateral. I got myself under control, though it took a while, and I knew I'd be seeing splintered rib cages and tasting atomized blood in my nightmares for the next week. My guide stayed close until I was ready, at which point it urged me to my feet and flew off. I followed after it with extra urgency. The bird finally led me to an alley across the street from a 2-story building that seemed slightly less dilapidated than its surroundings. I distrusted it immediately. The rust-red paint reminded me of old blood, and the well-maintained door seemed to me to be a trap. 2 cars were parked in front of the building, a black van and a gray sedan. A tall man with face tattoos was tugging something out of the back of the van, and it was putting up quite a fight. The man won, and a crying woman came tumbling out of the car. I took an aborted step forward to help, but the hummingbird flew in front of my face. I came up short and watched helplessly as the man dragged the woman into the building. I gave the bird a betrayed look. It didn't seem to notice, and it flew across the road to an alley a few buildings down from the one I'd been surveying. I darted across the road after it. The alley resembled the one I'd just been in, except for the man at the far end. It had been 8 years, but I recognized him immediately. Collateral had gotten handsome since the last time I'd seen him. He was clean-shaven and medium-haired, and he'd gained a few artless scars on his face. His shirt didn't do much to hide his solid muscle, and he held the pistol in his hand with the ease of long familiarity. Time had done him a lot of favors. Bad periphery. Focus, damn it! I shook my head and glanced at my bird friend, who was hovering at the end of the alley. The poor thing was clearly eager to get gone. Still, I had to ask, "Are you coming with me?" Shake. And was I seeing an expression of worry on that feathery face? "I'll be okay," I reassured it. "Collateral was a lot of things, but he's a good guy. He wouldn't let me get hurt." I paused, considered. "He wouldn't hurt me. But would you be willing to give him a heads up? You don't have to." Slow, hesitant nod. Then, with a flicker of wings, the bird was gone. No turning back now. I squared my shoulders, took a deep breath, and let my power settle over me. The boy, now man, who'd named me and I were due for a talk. Here's to hoping he hadn't forgotten me in the almost a decade since our last conversation. Queries, kudos, or concerns? Like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.